Did you see it? Let's watch it again. This right here is my absolute favorite horror, the Peripheral Scare. While not a formal term, the Peripheral Scare gets under my skin more than any other type of horror because its unassuming nature is designed to catch you off guard and ignite your primordial survival instincts to never again feel at ease the moment you become aware of it. It seems easy on paper, but it takes a fair bit of ingenuity to pull it off well, because it's not just simply about putting the horror out of focus and calling it a day, but instead, at least for me, a good Peripheral Scare organically reinvents the classical jump scare by modestly evoking a striking and sometimes uncanny aura into your subconscious. Fuck off, Gollum. Even if not outright unnerving to some, they're undoubtedly a hell of a lot of fun to notice and immerse you further into the horror by amplifying mundane moments that no longer have to work as hard to build natural tension. Now, for those wanting to get pedantic, I'm pretty loose with what constitutes a Peripheral Scare. It can simply be something that exists purely in the background or at the corner of the frame, be there suddenly and then it's gone, or be implied but never actually shown. Granted, there are a few pet peeve examples like Sinister that cheat the concept to create gotcha moments by later revealing the scare you did not see when in fact the scare was never actually there in the first place and only added in for the reveal to artificially inflate the reaction. That said, that criticism only comes retrospectively if you go back and look for it, yet nonetheless it highlights just how profoundly paramount both timing and obscurity within the frame are to the horror genre, especially when it comes to the phenomenon of analog horror, cursive photography, and found footage as a whole. Nah. What you're seeing on screen is the 2022 video game The Mortuary Assistant by solo developer Brian Clark, which literally just released a film adaptation by Shudder at the time of this video's well, I suppose it's still a good opportunity to get new eyes on my channel. Ever since playing it on stream for the first time back in October, it has positioned itself as genuinely one of the scariest games I have ever played, at least since Alien Isolation and Darkwood. It's definitely not my favourite horror game, it is rough around the edges, but as a purely scare-focused experience that treads a fine line between brooding and abrasively camp, The Mortuary Assistant feels like a lovingly nostalgic callback to those schlocky, yet creatively effective 90s, early 2000s horrors you would rent from your local video store, while delivering a compelling demonic possession tale akin to The Autopsy of Jane Doe, The Evil Dead, and Insidious. You know what? I'm starting to think this might be a bad idea. Now, before we dive deeper into despair, this video is sponsored by Raycon. With the Super Bowl and Winter Olympics this month, there's no better time to get inspired, push harder, and upgrade your workout routine. When you're training consistently, the right gear makes all the difference, and by gear, I mean Raycon's bone conduction headphones that have completely changed how I stay young and majestic. Bone conduction headphones sit outside your ears and deliver your favorite music and podcasts through vibrations in your bones that allow you to stay safe and aware of your surroundings without sacrificing clear, motivating sound to get you through any ordeal. Bone conduction headphones are built for all-day use with a comfortably fitting, flexible design, 13 hours of battery life, and are IP68 waterproof and dustproof. I use them when navigating particularly busy spaces like the gym or public transport, when walking cheddar during chaotic rush hour traffic, and recently I started going on peaceful night runs to help me sleep better by disconnecting from the stress without disconnecting from the world around me. With a 30-day happiness guarantee, Raycon provides premium performance at half the price of other competitors, so why not let the bone conduction headphones help you go for gold today by scanning the QR code on screen or visiting buyraycon.com/RyanBC to get 15% off. Set in 1998 Connecticut for reasons I'll explain later, the mortuary assistant tells the story of a graduate intern called Rebecca, whose teacher Raymond Delver recruits her to run the night shift at his mortuary, only to discover a malevolent demonic presence is using cadavers as temporary vessels while attempting to possess the living.
Sleep of the penitent, and bathe in the blood of the righteous. All of man country of sin. My coming shall herald glorious sorrow. I will clean the flesh of man for my own.
While there are many secrets to unravel later in the video, for now the goal of the game is for Rebecca to identify which of the 12 potential demons is attempting to possess her by embalming each cadaver and choosing one to destroy through a fairly involved banishment ritual. Sharing some notes with the relatively recent job simulator trend, the mortuary assistant sees you following a set of routine instructions as you get coldly close and personal with the cadavers to perform your duties as a mortician, while contending with various supernatural shenanigans that attempt to disrupt your efforts to stop the evil before it consumes you. The game's brilliance rests in its perpetual unpredictability and constant volatility, as scares fluctuate from subtle corner-of-your-eye sightings to outright story-focused confrontations that prevent you from ever becoming accustomed to your surroundings, as the feeling of dread and despair only intensifies the closer Rebecca comes to losing herself to the possession.
Do the dead comfort you?
Even when the scares do get more elaborate, it still relies on those peripheral instincts for you to notice just how often something is menacingly staring at you from the corner of the room, at least assuming you're more observant than me and don't inadvertently test the patience of the spirits waiting for you to give them your attention. Nah, I'm good. Wait, what the fuck? While there are a number of conventional jump scares, there's no big dramatic musical cues to force a reaction, as most scares rely on quiet ambience to build suspense, as doors randomly open, lights go off, and whispers and strange noises distract you from more aggressive encounters waiting from behind. Okay then. Although, ironically, some scares can be so easily missed that I find myself actively following sights and sounds out of morbid curiosity just to milk this monstrous cow for all it's worth, because even with all the footage I've captured for this video, I'm pretty sure I haven't experienced every peripheral scare the game has to offer. Now, to give you some early context to what you're dealing with, on your first night after Raymond informs you about your cursed predicament, you gain access to his Necronomicon-esque night shift database that tutorializes how to identify and banish the invading demon, while summarizing the various occultic oddities you're destined to deal with, effectively supplementing the main threats down to 3 types of lesser spirit: the woman in white, the shadow man, and the mimic. The thing is, none of them have the power to physically harm you, but wait a minute. Alright, where was I? The lesser spirits will torment you constantly on behalf of the demon to psychologically weaken you into succumbing to the possession sooner, which you can track the progress of via spirit writing, where you instinctively draw the symbol of the house that represents the demon. Again, don't worry, I will explain the lore of the occult later, but for now, the way the banishment process works is that as you embalm each of the 3 cadavers, you must observe for signs of possession such as markings and twitching before using a mysterious fluid known as baleful reagent to bind the demon to its vessel so it cannot escape during cremation. During all of this, as you encounter various hauntings and apparitions, you intermittently use leading strips that are marked with an ancient Athenian language that's said to be used by angels to communicate with man to scorch 4 unique sigils into the physical world. Once you have the 4 sigils, you can then use the database to determine the demon's name through its correct house, which, as I said, becomes clear through the spirit writing as your possession intensifies. However, the demon can still manipulate any cadaver it wants to throw you off the scent, so it's never explicitly obvious which one it's possessing at first, but if you read Raymond's various journals, notably the Book of Typhoon, it alludes to a secret alternate method to determine the house symbol, by collecting ash from the cremator and using the single match found in the reception to burn the symbol into a cadaver to see if it aligns with the spirit writing. Once you've finally made your decision, you put the sigils in the correct order in a device called the mark. Then you place the mark on the chosen body, send it through the cremator, and pray to your chosen god that you are correct. If you're wrong, you will get possessed, and the next morning Raymond will rebuke you before getting violently vecned to death. But if you don't complete the banishment on time, Raymond will kill you himself out of mercy. If you succeed on the first night, Raymond will welcome you to return and discover the mortuary's many secrets, which will send you down a complex and morally dubious rabbit hole as you also contend with the tragic circumstances of Rebecca's own backstory. Now, before we get into the nitty-gritty of what's going on, I do have to acknowledge the limitation that comes with multiple playthroughs required to get the full extent of the story. While it takes an average of 60 to 90 minutes to complete a shift, the reliance on procedurally generated scares means that you're almost guaranteed to start seeing repeat hauntings at some point that will numb you to the experience. You could argue the game is almost perfect if you play through the first night and accept the default ending, as vague as it is, but there are 2 major endings that require multiple shifts to get the necessary clues to unlock them, which means tediously repeating the core loop again and again. I'm generally okay with repetition, but I do take immense issue with the design decision to fragment the story across multiple playthroughs, which is something Silent Hill F did recently I also wasn't a fan of, because I just do not have the time in my life to play through the same game again just to experience some new narrative context or relative variation in the gameplay. It's often not worth the padding when I could just look up the extra details online. You can turn up the haunt aggression in the settings, but if you're going for a specific ending, I honestly don't recommend it because I never felt it actually increased the scares, but rather it shortened the length of time it takes to be possessed. I also feel it disrupts the rhythm somewhat because scares are often accompanied by a lot of stillness and mundane ambience to let you ferment in the unknowingness of what comes next. The downtime between hauntings is just as crucial for resetting your anticipation so you don't become desensitized by overstimulation. When it comes to the jank, I will admit I'm a lot more forgiving since it is a very small indie game, but the animation and graphical limitations can pull you out of certain scares, especially with the sort of plastic, uncanny character design that might inadvertently work for some people. Much of it is carried by strong, grounded atmosphere that relies on harsh shadows and lighting to evoke a tense sense of oppression and a touch of voyeurism when the hauntings start to take effect. The thing is, the game does have a sincere, self-aware, tongue-in-cheek attitude towards itself. In fact, if you sleuth around Rebecca's apartment before commencing each shift, you'll see the game laugh at its own limitations, such as the generic music band t-shirts and scorny TV to bypass copyright, the overly morbid books that hammer in the theme of the story, the really dirt shit coffee, and most notably, the literal self-described one-song radio station because that's all the developer could afford. Seriously, you get an achievement for calling the radio's bluff because if you keep listening to it, the radio host will keep awkwardly reminding you it is doomed to repeat itself and you should probably go.
DJ Two Shades again. This is the last time that I'm gonna tell you that this is the same song radio station. We're just gonna do the same thing over and over again. I'm gonna start saying the same stuff too. Cause it's just the same stuff over and over again. Here we go. Same song.
Again, it might pull some people out of the experience, but it made the game all the more endearing to me since this is the only levity you get before commencing its utterly macabre story. Anyway, let's finally address the specifics of the story. Obviously, it is open to interpretation with how obtuse it can be, but there is a lot going on underneath the surface. Firstly, the game does boldly claim to be based on true events, and given the setting is where the developer is from, I can only assume it's inferring to the infamous haunting in Connecticut, which most people may only remember because of the schlocky 2009 film. As a general summary, according to NBC, and all that's interesting, in the late 1980s, the Schnedeker family moved into a new home so that their son was closer to the hospital where he was undergoing cancer treatment. However, after violently spooky shenanigans began to ensue, the family learned that the house was previously a funeral home where the morticians allegedly practiced nefarious deeds like demonic worship and necrophilia. After the Schnedekers hired the demon-hunting con artists Ed and Lorraine Warren to investigate, the house was quickly exorcised, and soon their story was called into question in the same vein as the Amityville Horror. At most, that is the basic foundation for the mortuary assistant, but the story really begins on the Night Shift database, where along with his personal diary, we learn that Raymond spent decades researching the demonic through all forms of religion to develop a universal understanding of evil. However, Raymond eventually grew cynical at how differing belief systems reinterpreted the demonic to suit their own individual ideologies and enforce conformity to their beliefs, as opposed to actively fighting against the evil and trying to root it out of civilization. As such, this explains part of his motivation to fight the demons himself through a banishment ritual he concocted and successfully tested upon himself with the help of ancient religious texts gathered from a man called Achiel Sala in Egypt in 1989. To Raymond's understanding, after being banished by God, Satan created the Halls of Hell and appointed power to 3 individual houses of sin, known as Desolation, Immolation, and Invidiousness, to go forth and possess the sinful and bring about the destruction of God's creation on earth. However, the archdemons cannot simply breach the boundaries of the physical world, and must instead use lesser spirits present on Earth as manifestations of each house to effectively weaken the veil in order to possess their chosen living vessel. As I said earlier, while they can use cadavers temporarily, the only way to take over the living is to psychologically weaken them using their sins and past traumas against them. In the case of the morally contentious Raymond, it all began in his early years when his abusive mother became possessed, forcing him to devote his entire life to caring for her sickness despite his hatred towards her, thus allegorically perceiving possession as a burden he must inherit, prompting his virtuous goal to defeat the demonic evil once and for all. Although in the process, it can be argued that Raymond has ultimately done more harm than good, as he holds himself responsible for the demise of previous interns over the years, who all succumb to possession and die by his hand, as shown in the ending where Rebecca becomes possessed before she can complete the banishment. It's explained that Raymond became motivated by one particular victim he seemed to have a muse for called Valerie, who we discover has been held for years in captivity in the basement, as Raymond uses her possessed blood to create the reagent needed to bind demons to their vessel. All of this is inferred to with very acutely unsubtle abstract sequences and visions of Valerie begging Rebecca for help, with bloodletting being a practice used when the sinner is so far beyond God's forgiveness that the only way to atone is to drain out the sinful blood known as Corpus and burn it in an urn. Once you learn how to access the basement, you can help Valerie in theory, but it's pretty much discovered that her living vessel is long dead at this point, and she's basically serving as a possessed blood bank for Raymond, who later leaves a letter to a furiously sickened Rebecca, confirming he's been looking for an apprentice with the stomach to assist him in his questionable holy war. Rebecca is effectively going through trial by fire, but Raymond's behaviour suggests he isn't as altruistic as he seems, given his admittance to how desperately lonely and burned out he is from a life completely consumed by demons, both spiritual and emotional, and his desire to have someone share in his burden, having thrown Rebecca into a world without any warning. In fact, the biggest secret that Raymond keeps to himself is that his decaying possessed mother is chained deeper within the mortuary as he uses her flesh to tattoo a protection spell onto himself as she constantly continues to torment him, echoing back to the allegory that the possession represents the inescapable trauma of his childhood. This explicitly draws parallels with Rebecca, whose relationship with the demonic comes to symbolize her own battles with childhood trauma and survivor's guilt, which is honestly pretty brutal, so brace yourself on this one. To my understanding, from the fragmented recollection Rebecca experiences as the demons attempt to use her past sins against her, at the age of 14, Rebecca discovered her mother dead from a drug overdose and spiraled into a drug addiction of her own, prompting her father to act as her sponsor as he was battling his own demons, with their shared journey to sobriety being symbolized through coins. However, eventually Rebecca relapsed, and after her father found her, he slipped and fell to his death, leaving Rebecca with overwhelming guilt to the point that during her period of institutionalization, she attempted to take her own life. Thankfully, she was able to overcome her addiction with the aid of her grandmother, who later gifted her a necklace to not only symbolize spiritual protection, but represent the strength she and her father had for each other. The demons will constantly taunt Rebecca to submit to her guilt, but you can use the sobriety coins and the necklace as totems to overcome her torment and give her closure, with one ending seeing an apparition of her father, reassuring her that what happened is not her fault and she can be better than her mother, accepting that it is okay for her to move on.
I know it's hard, but you know where to go. You've already found it. Souls are suffering, Rebecca, but you can help them. You can bring comfort and closure to the living, and let the dead rest. Let the dead rest, Rebecca. I love you.
Dad, I love you.
Rebecca spells it out to her grandmother in the opening. Her choice to become a mortician isn't simply because of a morbid interest in the macabre, but rather it symbolizes an opportunity for her to confront her grief by literally facing death in its purest form. While Rebecca finding her strength suggests hope for a better future for her, there isn't any resolution to the demonic madness because not only will evil simply always exist, but Raymond himself has never been able to overcome his own demons, and in turn has slowly succumbed to the opposite outcome as Rebecca, by continuing to ferment in his pain, as though the mortuary itself has become his own eternal hell.